This is the story of a woman named Clara, widowed for more than 30 years, who poured her entire heart and life into raising her only son, Nathan. To Clara, Nathan was not just her child, but her entire world, the reason she rose early each morning and endured every hardship. Clara lived in a small house at the end of a quiet street. The home was always tidy, filled with the scent of polished wood, mingled with the aroma of freshly baked bread. She was not wealthy, but she was rich in love and steadfastness. Since her husband's death, Clara had been both mother and father. Every morning before dawn, she quietly left home with a bucket and broom to clean offices downtown. In the afternoon, she stood for hours behind the cashier counter at the nearby grocery store, her smile unwavering despite her aching legs. On weekends, she took sewing jobs from neighbors to earn a little extra. Clara's hands were rough and calloused, the small cracks at her knuckles like a silent diary of a lifetime of labor. Her face lined with wrinkles around the eyes and marked by a faint scar on her left cheek, carried a story few knew. To her, these were not signs of age, but proof of a day engulfed in fire when she risked everything to protect her young son. Every penny, every hour, every ounce of energy went toward Nathan so he could have a better life, so his dreams would never be limited by his mother's circumstances. Clara believed that as long as Nathan was happy and successful, every sacrifice she made would be worth it. One softly golden Saturday afternoon, Nathan returned home, a rare occurrence since moving to the city for work. But this time he wasn't alone. The door opened and beside him stood a young woman who looked as though she had stepped straight out of a magazine cover. "I want you to meet Isabel, my fiancée," Nathan said proudly. Clara felt as though a joyful melody was playing inside her heart. A wedding. She had imagined this moment hundreds of times when she would wear the blue lace dress she had kept carefully for years, sit in the front row and shed tears of happiness. She stepped forward to hug her son tightly, then opened her arms to welcome Isabel. The young woman responded with a brief, awkward touch, the expensive scent of her perfume overpowering the aroma of baked goods in the living room. Clara didn't mind the joy of meeting her future daughter-in-law outweighed everything. She bustled to make tea and bring out the freshly baked cake. As she poured the tea, she asked about the wedding plans, her eyes shining with hope. Nathan smiled, saying it would be a grand event because Isabel's family was wealthy and well-connected. Clara smiled back. "I look forward to meeting them." Isabel took a sip of tea, her eyes drifting down to Clara's calloused hands, then pausing on her gentle, time-worn face. For a brief moment, her gaze was so cold that Clara could not understand it. The warmth in the room slowly faded, replaced by a heavy silence. Nathan fiddled with his car keys on the table before hesitating. "Mom, there's something about the wedding we need to tell you." Nathan hesitated, staring down at the worn wooden table. Isabel placed her hand on his arm, giving a small nod as if urging him forward. Her voice rang out clear and cold. "Our wedding will be very special, the guest list full of people with status. And image is extremely important to my family." Clara blinked, not yet understanding. "What do you mean?" Nathan lifted his gaze, and in his eyes, Clara saw something she had never seen before. Not love, but shame. He swallowed hard, the words spilling out quickly as if afraid he might lose the nerve to speak them. "Mom, I think it would be best if you didn't come to the wedding." The room seemed to freeze. The ticking of the wall clock grew unnaturally loud. Clara felt as though the air had been sucked from her lungs. "Not come," she repeated, her voice trembling. Why Nathan avoided her eyes. You look tired, old. Your hands." He trailed off. Isabel finished the thought, her tone sharp as a blade. "Your presence wouldn't be appropriate. It would take away from the perfection we're aiming for." Those words fell on Clara's heart like heavy stones. The child she had carried, raised with her blood and tears, now saw her as a burden, a source of shame. Clara did not cry. She did not argue. She only looked deep into Nathan's eyes and saw before her not the little boy she once knew, but a stranger. She gave a small, slow, deliberate nod. "All right, Nathan." He smiled in relief, stood and left with Isabel. The door closed, leaving behind a heavy silence and a decision quietly forming in Clara's heart. After the door closed, Clara remained standing in the living room. On the table, the untouched tea and freshly baked cake stood as a sad testament to the joy that had just been extinguished. She walked slowly to the small mirror on the wall. The reflection showed skin marked by time, eyes lined with weariness, and calloused hands lifting to touch the faint scar on her left cheek. Memories rushed back, the crackling of fire, thick choking smoke, the coughs of her 5-year-old son. She remembered throwing herself through the flames, shielding him with her body, and the burn that left its mark forever. That scar was the price she had paid so Nathan could live. A tear fell not of sorrow but of clarity. If her son wanted a perfect wedding without her, she would let him have it. But on her terms. From this moment forward, she would no longer be the safety net for his selfish choices. The next morning, Clara put on a simple navy dress, her best shoes, and the pearl necklace her late husband had left her. She walked into the bank and went straight to the manager's office, someone who had known her for years. Her voice was calm and firm. "I want to close the joint savings account with Nathan, transfer everything to my name, cancel his credit card, and stop paying the rent for his apartment as of this month." The manager looked at her, recognizing beneath her composed expression a deep hurt and an unshakable resolve. Clara left the bank feeling strangely light. One chapter of her life had closed, but a new door was opening for both her and her son. Leaving the bank, Clara didn't head straight home. Instead, she turned into a small building with a weathered wooden sign, Law Office, Richard Hall. The silver-haired, kind-looking man inside looked up as she entered. "Clara, it's been a long time. Is something urgent?" he asked with genuine concern. She sat down, her hands interlaced. "I want to change my will. Completely." Mr. Hall frowned slightly. "At the moment, everything your house savings insurance goes to Nathan. How do you want to change it?" Clara met his eyes, speaking slowly and firmly. "Remove Nathan's name. I want everything to go to the St. Mary's Children's Fund." The lawyer paused, momentarily stunned. "Clara, that's a big decision." "What happened?" Silently, she placed her rough, calloused hands on the table, the very hands Nathan had once called an embarrassment. "My son told me not to attend his wedding because I'm old, ugly, inappropriate. He's forgotten that these hands once carried him through a wall of fire." Mr. Hall tilted his head, disbelief flickering in his eyes. Clara gently touched the faint scar on her left cheek. He was only 5 when the kitchen caught fire. The smoke was so thick I couldn't see, only hear his crying. A piece of ceiling fell, blocking the way out. I used my body to shield him, pushing him through. The flames burned my face, left this mark. But I saved him. Her voice lowered, but her gaze was razor sharp. If he sees this scar as a disgrace, then he no longer has any right to inherit anything from me. Mr. Hall removed his glasses, wiped his eyes, then nodded. "I'll make it happen right away." The new will was signed under the midday sun. Clara rose, feeling as though she had set down a heavy weight and locked the door on privileges her son no longer deserved. 3 days later, as the city buzzed with news of Nathan and Isabel's wedding, Clara chose a different path. She wore her simple navy dress to church, sitting in her usual pew. To the solemn sound of the organ, she bowed her head in prayer for strength, for peace, and for the son she once knew, now a stranger. After leaving the church, Clara went to the soup kitchen, her calloused hands swiftly packing hot meals for the homeless. She smiled her heart light, not because she had forgotten, but because she knew she had chosen rightly. Miles away in a grand ballroom, Nathan stood at the aisle grinning as Isabel approached in her pristine white gown. Flowers, lights, champagne, powerful guests, everything was as in a dream. He smiled for the cameras, not once thinking of the empty chair meant for his mother. The wedding ended with fireworks and toasts. They departed for a luxury island resort, powdery white sand, ocean water, as clear as glass. 7 days passed in champagne, Michelin star dining and shopping bags from elite brands. Nathan felt on top of the world, until the final night. After a 7-course meal at the resort's most expensive restaurant, the server presented the bill on a silver tray. Nathan smiled and handed over his sleek credit card, the unlimited pass he had always counted on. Minutes later, the server returned, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry, sir. The card has been declined." Nathan chuckled, assuming it was a glitch. But after a second, then a third attempt, the answer remained a cold blade. "The card has been canceled." Isabel's smile vanished, and in that moment, Nathan had no idea this was only the first crack in what would become a total collapse. The next morning, Nathan called the bank, trying to keep his voice steady, but when the voice on the line said this account was closed by the primary owner, Mrs. Clara, he froze. A chill ran down his spine. He sat in silence for a moment, then tried to reassure Isabel, "It's just a misunderstanding, Mom will fix it." But her eyes no longer held trust. The flight back to the city passed in silence. Isabel stared out the window the entire way. When they reached the building, Nathan saw an orange notice taped to the apartment door. He tore it down. It was an eviction order. Rent for the month was unpaid. In 3 days, the locks would be changed. Isabel looked at the paper, her voice like ice. "You said this apartment was yours," Nathan faltered. "Mom has been paying the rent all along." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You live off your mother, the same woman you were too ashamed to invite to our wedding." She turned away. "Take me to my parents' house." On the drive, Nathan pleaded. Isabel didn't turn her head. "You're a man, Nathan. Handle it yourself." The gates of her parents' estate slammed shut behind her, leaving Nathan alone on the long, empty road. He turned his car around and drove straight to the house at the end of the street. Clara opened the door, a dish towel still in her hand. Nathan didn't waste time. "You canceled my card, stopped paying my rent. Are you trying to ruin my life?" She looked at him, her gaze calm but cutting. "That money was mine, earned with the very hands you were ashamed of. You can't take the money while rejecting the person who gave it." Nathan froze. For the first time, he realized his mother was no longer the safety net he had always counted on, and this time there would be no easy way back. The eviction notice wasn't a bluff. 3 days later, the building manager arrived with a locksmith. Nathan stood helplessly as his expensive suits, watches, and gadgets were placed neatly on the curb, his failure laid bare for the entire neighborhood. He called Isabel, voice cracking. "It's just temporary. Can I stay with you?" Her reply was ice. "My parents won't take in a man who lives off his mother and is ashamed of her." "We're done." Click. Next were calls to friends, the same ones who had patted his back at the wedding, but the answers were all the same. "Sorry, I'm busy." "Not a good time." Rumors of him rejecting his mother had spread faster than he imagined. No one wanted to be associated with him. Backed into a corner, Nathan sold his luxury car, pawned his watches and suits. The meager sum was just enough to rent a dingy room in a rundown neighborhood. The air smelled of mildew, and every night the sounds of traffic and shouting seeped through the thin walls. To survive, Nathan took 2 jobs hauling crates in a warehouse by day, washing dishes in a diner by night. Hot water and harsh chemicals ate into his once soft hands. His back ached constantly, and every time his cracked hands touched cold water, Nathan thought of his mother's hands that had endured this for decades to give him a better life. For the first time, he began to understand and feel ashamed. One late night after a dishwashing shift, Nathan wandered aimlessly. His worn shoes scraped the pavement, his sore hands throbbing, until he realized he was walking down a familiar street. At the far end, his mother's small house still glowed with light. Through the window, he saw Clara sitting in her old armchair, a book open in her lap, the warm lamplight wrapping around her like an embrace. The sight rooted Nathan to the spot. The house looked peaceful, yet to him now, it felt like a world he no longer belonged to. His chest ached as memories flooded back dinners with his mother waiting by the door, laughter in the kitchen smelling of fresh bread, her calloused hand ruffling his hair after a lost soccer game. And then the memory of his wedding day. The empty chair, her calm yet wounded gaze when she heard his rejection. Hot tears filled his eyes, not for his poverty, but for realizing he had hurt the only person who had ever loved him unconditionally. He remembered the fire when he was a boy, how he once touched her scar and said, "You're my hero, Mom." Now he wondered how had that little boy become such a cold, ungrateful man. He wanted to run across the street, knock on the door, and beg for forgiveness. But his feet stayed still. He knew. It wasn't time yet. Empty apologies would not heal the wound. He had to change truly. That night, under the warm glow from the house at the end of the street, Nathan decided on the road he would take to return. After that night, Nathan returned to his small room with a heavy heart, but for the first time in months, he knew exactly what he had to do. The next day, he resigned from the one remaining office job, a position that barely paid but kept a sliver of his pride intact. He went to a construction company and asked for work as a laborer. Gone were the suits and shiny watches. Now he wore a hard hat safety vest and carried a shovel. The first days were agony. His arms burned under the sun, his back threatened to fold after every sack of cement. But strangely, when he received his first paycheck, small but honestly earned, he felt a part of his burden lift. He began saving every cent. Meals were just bread and water. His room still shabby, but slowly the envelope of money grew thicker. In his mind, every coin was a small step toward the house at the end of the street. Every time his hardened hands gripped that pay, he remembered his mother's hands calloused like his, now the same hands that had guided him through childhood. Nathan knew that if he wanted to hold those hands again, he had to be worthy. Nearly a year passed. The envelope was no longer just money, it was proof of change. Nathan knew it was time to knock on his mother's door, not to ask, but to give back. On a quiet Saturday afternoon, Nathan walked slowly down the familiar street. He wore only a clean shirt and simple trousers. His hair was neatly trimmed, his skin tanned his hands thick with calluses. In his shirt pocket, the envelope of savings felt heavier with each step. Standing before the small house, he took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened and Clara appeared. For a brief moment she looked surprised. The man before her was nothing like the son she remembered, thinner, sun-worn, but with eyes bright and humble. "Mom." Nathan's voice was hoarse. "I'm sorry for everything." He stood straight, offering no excuses. "The words I said, they were cruel and unforgivable. I forgot that this scar exists because I'm alive. I forgot that these hands raised me. You're not ugly. You're the most beautiful person I've ever known." Nathan took out the envelope, holding it toward her. "This money is just the beginning. I'll repay you every cent, even if it takes my whole life." Clara looked deep into her son's eyes. She saw no arrogance, only sincere remorse and true resolve. She didn't take the envelope. Instead, the hands that had raised him slowly opened. Nathan stepped into her embrace, his head resting on her shoulder, hot tears mingling with the memory and the love that had never left. "Welcome home, son," Clara whispered, and in that moment the past seemed to finally set down its weight. That afternoon, mother and son sat together in the small kitchen. The teapot sent up gentle steam, sunlight slanting through the window onto the worn wooden table. There were no reproaches, no flowery promises, only the warm silence of two hearts finding each other again. Clara knew Nathan could never erase the wounds of the past, but she also understood that sometimes a single step back home accompanied by genuine humility was the beginning of all healing. For Nathan, the past year had taught him a lesson he'd never learned before. Greatness is not in outward luxury, but in the calloused hands that raised you. Beauty is not in unlined skin, but in the scars that tell a story of love and sacrifice. He realized that the greatest inheritance he had ever received was not money, nor the house, nor material gifts. It was his mother's unconditional love. A legacy that could not be bought, stolen, or lost unless he himself chose to reject it. Nathan placed his hand over his mother's this time without hesitation. "I'll never let myself forget where I came from again," he said softly. Clara only smiled, her gaze as warm as sunlight. Their story closed, not with a perfect ending, but with a new beginning. One where gratitude would lead the way, and love would be the foundation. And perhaps the greatest lesson for all of us is to never be ashamed of the hands that raised us and the heart that protected us even when the whole world turns away.